Your honey jar looks innocent, golden, thick, natural. The label says pure, maybe even organic. But here's the uncomfortable question no one asks anymore. Why does something that once healed wounds now spike your blood sugar like candy? For thousands of years, honey was called liquid gold, not as a metaphor but as a literal description of its value. In ancient Egypt, jars of honey were sealed in tombs, and when archaeologists opened them 3,000 years later, the honey was still edible. In medieval Europe, surgeons packed open wounds with honey and watched infections retreat. Monasteries built entire healing traditions around it. Vikings carried it on long sea voyages because it never spoiled. Honey wasn't just food. It was medicine, it was preservation, it was protection. So what changed? The bees didn't suddenly forget how to make honey. We changed the system around them. Let's start with something simple: the bees themselves. Medieval bees lived wild or semi-wild. They nested in hollow trees, woven straw, skeps, or simple wooden boxes. They chose how to build their comb. They decided the cell size. They swarmed when nature told them to. The beekeeper's role was small: protect the hive, harvest once a year, leave enough behind for winter. There were no standardized frames, no forced wax foundations, no artificial insemination of queens to maximize production. Modern bees, on the other hand, are bred like livestock. Queens are selected for gentleness and high output. Colonies are optimized for yield. Genetic diversity shrinks. Bees that once survived winters on their own now depend on sugar feeding and medication. And then there's what they eat. A medieval hive in a forest might collect nectar from hundreds of different plant species: linden trees, clover, wild thyme, blackberry blossoms, fruit orchards. Every flower added different enzymes, flavonoids, essential oils, and micronutrients. That diversity created complexity. Real honey contains enzymes like glucose oxidase, which slowly produces hydrogen peroxide. One of the reasons raw honey has antibacterial properties: it contains pollen, amino acids, minerals, and plant compounds that interact with your immune system. Modern bees are often placed in monocultures, vast fields of a single crop: sunflower, rapeseed, almond orchards. For weeks, they collect nectar from one source only. Then they're loaded onto trucks and moved again. The result? Chemically simple honey, high in sugar, low in complexity. And when harvest time comes, many commercial operations take nearly everything, then replace the bees' winter food with sugar syrup. The bees store it, mix it, seal it. What you buy may not be pure nectar at all, but a blend of nectar and industrial sugar the bees were never meant to process. But the biggest change happens after the honey leaves the hive. Medieval honey was handled gently. Combs were cut and left to drip through cloth at room temperature, or they were crushed and pressed through linen. No machines, no heat, no The honey was cloudy, sometimes grainy, often full of tiny wax particles and pollen. And yes, it crystallized. That was normal. That was proof it was alive. Modern honey, it goes through an industrial pipeline, first centrifuged, then heated, sometimes up to 70 or 80 degrees Celsius. Why? To make it flow faster, to prevent crystallization, to make it look clear and appealing, to kill yeast that might ferment it. But here's what heat does. Enzymes begin to degrade above 40 degrees. Glucose oxidase, the enzyme responsible for antibacterial activity, becomes inactive around 50 degrees. Vitamins break down, antioxidants lose potency. What remains is mostly fructose and glucose, sugar. Then comes ultra-filtration. Honey is pushed through fine filters that remove pollen. Why remove pollen? Because pollen reveals origin. Through pollen analysis, experts can identify where honey truly comes from. Without pollen, tracing becomes harder. But pollen isn't just a fingerprint. It's nutrition. It contains proteins, minerals, B vitamins, and immune-modulating compounds. Remove it, and you remove part of what made honey biologically active. Now let's talk about something rarely mentioned: storage. Honey used to be stored in clay pots or wooden barrels. These materials allowed minimal gas exchange while keeping moisture out. Over time, honey matured, flavors deepened, enzymes continued subtle work. Today, honey often sits in plastic containers or metal drums, sometimes for months in warm warehouses. Heat, light, and time degrade to what little activity remains. And then there's contamination. Studies have detected pesticide residues in commercial honey samples worldwide. Herbicides like glyphosate show up because bees forage where chemicals are sprayed. Add antibiotics used in industrial beekeeping, and the natural product becomes more complicated than most consumers realize. Now think about how your body responds. Raw, minimally processed honey has a different metabolic effect than refined sugar. Not because it lacks sugar, but because its enzymes, plant compounds, and trace elements slow absorption and interact with digestion. Processed honey behaves much closer to table sugar. Rapid glucose spike, insulin surge, energy crash, and hunger returns quickly. In the Middle Ages, honey was local and seasonal. A village knew the difference between spring blossom honey and dark forest honey. Each tasted different. Each had different uses. Today, you buy blossom honey, a standardized blend from multiple regions, sometimes multiple countries, designed to taste the same every time. Uniform, predictable, shelf-stable, but biologically simpler. Now, here's something important. Not all modern honey is useless. There are still beekeepers who harvest gently. There are still raw, cold-extracted honeys that retain complexity, but they are harder to find. Real, raw honey crystallizes. It may look cloudy, it may taste slightly floral, resinous, even mildly bitter. If your honey stays perfectly clear and liquid for a year, it has likely been heated or heavily processed. So what can you do? Buy from local beekeepers when possible. Ask if the honey has been heated. Ask whether bees are fed sugar syrup during winter. Look for minimal filtration. Expect crystallization and don't fear it. Or simply shift how you view honey. It isn't magic. It isn't poison. But it isn't all equal either. The real difference isn't medieval versus modern. It's living versus industrial. The medieval farmer with a straw skep wasn't primitive. He worked with ecological limits. He harvested modestly. He left enough for the bees. The honey he collected reflected biodiversity, patience, and minimal interference. We traded that for efficiency, for uniformity, for higher yields, for supermarket shelves that always look full. And somewhere along the way, we forgot that food isn't just about calories. It's about complexity. It's about relationship. It's about how much we interfere with natural systems before they stop functioning the way they were meant to. So next time you open a jar of honey, pause for a second. Ask yourself, is this alive? Or is this just sugar wearing a natural disguise? Because sometimes the most ordinary things in your kitchen carry the biggest story of what we've changed and what we might still recover. If you enjoyed this, make sure to subscribe. We uncover forgotten truths about food, health, and history every week.